Some dicey signal today, but we'll see how that runs. Whoops. Damn. Hate those stupid little menus. Welcome to Evolution Hour. We'll run our little opening intro. Clickety typewriters, analog devices. That's what I grew up with, kids. That's what I grew up with. My. And don't forget, totukenwordpress.com. A lot of stuff there. Freebies, PDFs to download. I share them with absolute abandon, or if you can find somebody who is not absolutely abandoned, do that as well. Yeah, we're running at about 70%. We'll see how that works. As you know, we are continuing the exciting world of source-by-source analysis of Jonathan Sarfati and Joel Tay's Titans of the Earth, Sea, and Air, which is a glossy, well-photographed, visually okay creationist screed that slips in the creationy stuff every once in a while. And because they don't have a reference list, it's difficult to find out what. Oh, we're up to full signal. Good. That's great. And then our part two will relate to some stuff on geckos that came to my attention as a result of a post by Joel Duff a ways back, and that brought to mind some interesting little bits about how anti-evolutionists have been using geckos. Anyhow, starting off, the paper stack stuffed around in here. Sarfati and Tay are going off more on the heart issue, that cardiovascular system stuff. They're not really diving into the niggling details too much in this section. And in fact, the next segment, there's a bunch of sauropods next on the list, and they're not offering any sources on it all. So it's kind of sparse. But anyway, they put up a paper from 1998 by Choi, which they misspelled his name as CHOI. Regarding whether or not the Barosaurus dinosaur might have had multiple hearts to accommodate the idea that it could lift its head up high. This was actually discussing show and tell time. Boom, 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 and it goes right up out of the screen. Let's see if I can show it. Kind of like that. There we go. That would be its probable more likely pose. But anyway, this was the controversial Barosaurus reconstruction that was done at the American Museum of Natural History. And this was retained in the model, although it was listed as a Diplodocus when a Boston Museum series, the Batat collection, was done many years ago. It's one of the niftiest designs, though. It's really impressive. And so there was considerable issue at the time from the 1990s on as to whether or not could sauropods actually lift themselves up like that? And I think Robert Backer was kind of taking that position, and the romantic in me wants sauropods to be able to do that, their little clawed feet and all that, being able to pounce down on potential predators and all that. But the question is, just as giraffes have difficulty pumping blood all the way up, something that's this long, if you rear up like that, holy smokes, that's an awful lot of pressure to be able to get things up here. And is it physically, anatomically feasible for that to occur in any vertebrate? And there's an awful lot of back and forth on that. And Choi was entering the fray on suggesting that there might have been multiple hearts involved. And later on, they had to kind of defend themselves. This 1998 post, in fact, was not the original post. It was a response letter relating to some of the criticism that had come up on it. The original paper was from 1966. Choi had cited a Scientific American article from 1966 on the issue of whether there were other vertebrates that were known to have multiple hearts. And it's basically the lamprey, or hagfish, rather. But there's a paper from 1991 I will be putting up that gets basically the idea across, that these like little subsections of that assist in pumping blood along, although obviously hagfish don't have to worry about high blood pressure in necks rearing up. The 1992 paper that Choi had originally done with a different author, by the way, That one is available, and I'll be putting the link up on that as well, so you can follow up on the joys of all of this little side issue. But it kind of begs the question of what would prevent a designer from designing something with multiple hearts? Um, Anything wrong with that? Just as why can't a designer make a Pegasus with 4 legs and wings? Is there anything preventing the designer from doing that? And would it, in fact, have given evolutionist conniption fits trying to do phylogenies if you actually did that? Um, Sarfati and company don't really dive into that much, and they don't dive into enough technical literature to get close enough to the issues about cardiovascular systems to really deal with it. The general consensus among people in the scientific field is that, probably they couldn't raise up like that, or particularly they couldn't raise their necks up even without rearing. Um, and so that's a separate issue from the cardiovascular system of an animal that's keeping its head down like that. So Sarfati, and they kind of tease a little bit around the issue, but they're not really coming up with the whole matter. And what's to prevent the designer from designing anything that way? Is there some metaphysical limit to how much pumping capacity can go on inside of a vertebrate? Or is it that Sarfati and Tay are functionally running like normal evolutionary thinkers who think in terms of phylogeny and think in terms of actual biology, to recognize that there are natural limitations that we can observe in organisms that we can use to infer what was going on in organisms that are now extinct? Sounds kind of naturalistic to me. So that this issue is actually skating around a sidebar on that. So let's get on to the matter of the geckos. In fact, most of the sources, I'm hoping I'll be able to stick all the sources in to the thing, but there is a length limit on the description on that, so I may have to do some triage once I find out how long the segment is. But anyway, it's an interesting little subject, and it came up from Joel Duff back in April, who noted that the creationist gecko meme was popping around, and it's a very minor what I could find at least one area online where somebody had repeated it from January 2022. But it was claiming that a gecko, little itty bitty thing that had been trapped in amber from 54 million years ago, was literally the same species as Nautilus elegans. Well, A, it wasn't. And B, besides capitalizing everything but the genus name, so that shows that whoever was putting the meme up didn't really know the scientific nomenclature thing. Oh, hi, Vesta. A very sharp-eyed viewer of the episode noticed that they'd actually gotten the name of the living genus wrong, Nautilus elegans. And there's a 2005 paper that I'll be putting a link up to that in fact proposed a completely different genus name for it, Yantara gecko balticus. You can look at that at your leisure. Now, that brought up the whole idea of where is gecko research going on, and how much of it is actually bumped into by creationists. So most higher level YEC apologists operate at just the gee whiz level. Geckos can like stick their little paws on things and not fall off. Isn't that wonderful? Gee whiz. Isn't that astonishing? So Sherwin at the ICR from 2005 was taking that thing. No sources whatsoever on that one. Thomas 2008 also at ICR was doing about the same thing on a fossilized gecko fits of creation model. Creation Wiki 2014 doesn't even try any YEC stuff. It just wonders how any of it could have evolved, but doesn't go into any details. Jason Weil from 2014 had a post, which he then recycled by him unchanged in 2023. And there it was dwelling on the allostatic factors in gecko adhesion, per a 2014 paper that I will be able to put the link up on. Sarfati jumped back in 2015 with a similar kind of a post. There was a short apologetics press from Eric Lyons in 2022 on a video that was basically making the same thing. And he was riffing off of a paper that was by then 20 years old from Autumn et al. From PNAS that I'll be putting a link up to. Only one creationist tried to actually play the stasis game that the meme pick was doing, and that is our ever annoying David Kopej from 2008. And he was riffing off of a secondary account that was alluding finally to a 2008 paper by Arnold and Poinar on a 100 million-year-old gecko fossil, none of which, of course, ultimately is relating to the idea of this living fossil stasis issue. There's also been some interesting research on the evolution of the adhesion system that the geckos use. So there was a paper in 2017 by Higham, then there was, which by the way earned a preemptive finger wave over in ID land by Klinghoffer in 2016 as the thing was getting into pre-publication stage. And then it continued to have fossil material come along, Daza 2014 and Chernansky 2022 on some more examples. And then the Bauer name that had popped up earlier in the creationist riffing, the team that he was involved with continued to do work in the field. A whole slew of stuff in 2019 on gecko adhesion, participating in a symposium in 2019. Then there's more stuff from Russell and Gamble, more stuff from Higham again, Griffing in 2022 on the relatively minor developmental modifications underlying the process in the various examples. And then there is just almost hot off the press, a paper from 2023 by Heinecke, reflecting the latest phylogeny of the forms that are available. What's so fascinating is how much work has been done on our cute little geckos, how much of it's quite recent, how none of it's being done by creationists, and the creationists that do bump into its tiptoe just around the edges and don't ever really offer any much detail on it other than the gee whiz wagon. I thought that was kind of interesting. So we'll find out how much of those links I can dump into the listing without shooting over the limit on that. A little sidebar has come up as well that's going to be hitting come Wednesday. I'm the internet willing. I hope to be participating in a little chat on Dan Stern Cardinale's channel on a brand new blip that has come from Bill Dembski putting up a thing at Evolution News about a quiz to test whether you are a Darwinian worshiper or not. And this Dan was just going, what? And wanted to know if he had some other people that would like to be dealing with it. And I think Ages of Rocks will be joining us on that as well. Anyway, I was very much interested in jumping into that. I've worked out a spreadsheet analysis where there were just like 40 questions. And so I wanted to catalog them as to whether or not they were actually relevant to evolutionary theory and how much of it was turned out to be like Coulter-Kempf issues about human exceptionalism and all of that, which most of them this area. Okay, where you just lost, our numbers seem okay. Oh, okay, boop, clock ticker's running again. I was so interested in getting involved in this because I have been a target of the wrath of Bill Dembski. Back in 2006, he was the technical advisor on Ann Coulter's Godless book. And I was taking aim at some of that point, and to the point of where when I was inquiring what exactly intelligence he was offering for Coulter's book, he didn't particularly like the questions that I was asking, and he decreed that I was smarmy. And my response was, "Oh, I'm way beyond smarmy. I'm an arrogant bastard buster. I'm not merely at smarmy level. I've moved way beyond that." Anyway, what struck me about Dembski coming out like this, I was thinking, my God, what did they take him out of mothballs? Because Dembski has kind of disappeared from the apologetics fray for, yipes, the last 5 or 6 or more years. He pretty much stopped writing purely intelligent design stuff and started writing basically religious apologetics. He has a worldview other than the young Earth creationist angle, his worldview is, by his own admission, is very similar to that of Henry Morris, the late Henry Morris. And so he feels closer to that than he would with any theistic evolutionist, let alone a non-Christian evolutionist. But his complex specified information arguments about the supposed impossibility of things evolving, and there has to be an intelligent mind behind this. And he gets popped up, he gets alluded to occasionally. Steve Meyer will allude to him a little bit, and Behe and others, but he's not exactly all that critically employed for the defense side, in part because, spoiler alert, he never actually applied any of this to genetics. I mean, he wrote book after book after book, and he would use examples, abstract examples like Mount Rushmore and things like that, but not apply any of it to genetics. I would contend is because his ideas can't be applied to genetics. They're absolutely useless. So they are even below Sanford genetic entropy level. And the fact that nobody in the design community, I would be thinking Douglas Axe and Gauger being the obvious candidates, have done anything to kind of apply this stuff, these notions, to actual genetic information, if it was so fantastically fruitful. Well, no one's applying it, so that is kind of an indication that it's not fruitful. So if anybody out there in internet land is aware of any instance in which Dembski ever actually, or any of his followers, have attempted to actually apply CSI ideas to actual genetics, let me know, and I can correct things accordingly. But I'm unaware of any of that actually happening. Okay, so let me jump in and put my little thank you note to our patrons, without whom this would be vastly more difficult to pull off than it is currently. I am but a lowly little retiree who gets a little trickle of income from book royalties and material from the patrons. And so it makes a big difference. I'm envious of the mega crowd that have a great deal more revenue streams from the material that comes in from direct donations. But we do what we can. And okay, closing off my little menus there. But we continue on the process to the best of our ability. I'm just nearly the pass through on finishing off the chapter 5 section that Jackson has sent on volume 2 of Rocks Were There, which goes into origins of vertebrates and rakes Gunter Beckley over the coals on Precambrian and Cambrian organisms. There's a lot of stuff going on in that chapter. And then I have a massive material then that relates to both intelligent design criticisms of those issues and creationist criticisms, and then more technical literature on the various little nooks and crannies of the genetics and developmental biology that's been culled out over the years that fill in the processes of how vertebrates developed in the tetrapod era and beyond. And so I'm folding the relevant stuff on that into the chapter as we go, in addition to waiting tick-tock for Dapper Dino's video to come out, hopefully next month, where that will finish off the segment for Mark Armitage's Triceratops horn and his various tissue issues, where apparently Dapper's tracked down where the fossil came from, and it hell ain't Cretaceous rocks. It's quaternary. And so it totally shoots up the probability that he was dealing with a bison latifrons horn fossil, not a Triceratops horn, and just didn't know the difference on it. The methods and details of the various papers he's done are way too vague. So it makes me wonder, like that Dimetrodon sample that he got. Is that really a Dimetrodon? It's there's a whole bunch of issues that pop up on that. So we'll want to deal with that material. Anyhow, Wednesday, it's going to the thing on Dan Stern Cardinale's stuff is going to be about 9 o'clock Eastern time, so it'll be 6 o'clock here. and you can catch his channel to follow that little issue and see how we can go on there. But anyway, um, it's a fascinating quiz that tells you way more about Dembski's obsessions than it does about evolutionary theory. And one thing that struck me after I'd gone through and looked at the details of it, and I realized one thing that's not on the stupid 40 questions is anything about the fossil record. So it's an intriguing mess to go on. That we wonder whether or not Dembski's going to be trotting out. He's roughly my age. Whether he's going to be trotting out any more little bits of wisdom on that front. And because I think the tendency is people in the design community are probably paying way more attention to Dan Stern and Gardner than they are to me, that this issue might get a little pushback from them because they've done various things, Dan's stuff, the Luskin debate, and Erica and others. So it's an intriguing. I'm just a lowly little scholar running down here in the basement of life. But meanwhile, I do know how to read sources, and so I can spot stuff. It'll be an interesting little guidepost to see. Also, a measure of how little Dembski's thinking has evolved, shall we say, over the last 15 or 20 years. It's just basically mired in a bunch of culture camp issues about human exceptionalism and obsessions with Richard Dawkins. 3 of the questions were kind of snipes at Richard Dawkins, going, excuse me, but I don't need to know anything about Richard Dawkins to know anything about evolution, and you're taking this way too seriously, kids. So it's a fascinating little psychological profile, but Dembski often doesn't know when to quit. And this was apparently another example of it. So let me put our little commercial up on for our Rocks Were There Volume 1. Eventually there will be a Volume 2. And let me get myself queued up here. And come on. There we go. And over here and get my little shift going. And remember, this is noisy. And catch you after the end. Not only is the Rocks Were There a thick tome, chock-a-block with information, but it's thick enough that you can use it as like a brickbat to go at people on there. You can see I'm in my sweater and stuff again. We had, although we had a brief little heat dome here in Spokane where we were bumping up into the 70s and 80s. We suddenly roller coastered down back into 50s and 60s, and we've had cold, close to freezing nights, and all people are having a panic about whether their plants have to be covered over for that. And by the end of the week, we're supposed to be up into the 80s and 90s again. So whereas the rest of the country is just mired in a muck of heat, we get our little roller coaster because all of those cute little inversions and things and whiplashes of the jet stream that are pumping cold or hot air around the various parts of the country. We're kind of on the cusp of it up here in the Pacific Northwest, of where we're getting the brunt of this stuff as it's bouncing over the Cascades and all that. So anyway, exciting little world on there. So everybody take care wherever you are. And once we get our things posted in, I will put as many of the sources as I can from our discussion tonight into the linkage, it's a big pile up. The gecko subject is really such an absolutely fascinating one because the amount of stuff on the mechanisms and dynamics and structure and the phylogeny of the various forms of these things, and delving into the genetics and the environmental pressures and all of that. What's stopping intelligent designers or creationists to dive into any of these topics and apply their model to account for anything other than just saying, isn't the creator clever? And we're never going to be seeing that. Meanwhile, the science marches on. So I thought you should have a little bit of it aside and a chance to see a ridiculously tall Barosaurus model. 50s in Calgary and water shortages. Yikes. Oh, yeah. We're fairly lucky here in Spokane because we have an aquifer that we've been very mindful of keeping clean and unpolluted and firm. Other areas have water drawn from various reservoirs. I drive past the big reservoir system up in the Cascades whenever I go to Seattle, and I can see how high or low the reservoir is, and it's gotten quite low. Other areas in the Pacific Northwest are drawing off, like our agricultural system draws off Columbia River. And so long as the Columbia River's got water in it coming down, which all the climate models are suggesting is not going to be changing much, we're able to squeak along pretty nicely. And so our agricultural system and that still has a nice solid framework. We're still mindful here in Spokane about the need to potentially ration water during the hot months and alternate what side of the street you're living on and so forth and thing, not watering prior to 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., things like that. We're not in firm rationing territory, but the past few years with the yo-yos of temperatures going up and down, we've had to be very mindful of all of that. So good luck, Calgary. Hope you're handling that reasonably well. And this sort of stuff is, so long as we have our continuing warming climate, this is going to be a thing that ain't going to change. And hopefully we can pull this back from the precipice before things reach catastrophic points where ecosystems start breaking down, rivers dry up, and so forth. You've already got the situation with the Colorado River. There are disastrous incidents down in Arizona where various Arabian concerns are literally pumping water out of the Arizona well water at no cost because their legislature refuses to change their laws about basically freebie domain down there. And so there's just an ecological disaster waiting to happen. So very, very awkward. 2 sources of water. Main one is non-functional. Is the water? Oh, that's cute. Yeah, that's that's the one area where some areas technologically you can do desalination if you live near the sea. That's expensive and energy intensive. In other areas, to their credit, Las Vegas, although it's a giant 2 million population that has a vast water reservoir thing, they've actually been kind of mindful of the fact that there's limitations on their water usages, and they've been fairly careful on it. What part of the arguments that come about, like down in Arizona and California, has to do with who gets dibs for the Colorado River water for agricultural purposes. And so there are major areas. California has a long history of rapacious water projects. So like Los Angeles and the Owens Valley that was just drained dry back in the giant Mulholland Canal that was built in the 1920s. And when I was a younger annoying person, there were rumbles in the 60s and 70s from California who wanted to get access to Columbia River water, and they wanted to build canals to bring water down to California. And we had enough various people in our House and Senate positions that said, hell no, you can just forget that. And I think that's kind of like a given in here. I don't think there would be any movement by even Trumpistas in the state if they were in power that would ever allow that to happen. It's fighting words from that front. You have a different dynamic going on over in Montana and Wyoming and Idaho and others, because they have a different dynamic in terms of their relation to snowpack and the river systems and the like. So it's an interesting thing to think of. Of course, way lower population when you're looking at like Wyoming and the Dakotas and that. Washington State is a moderate-sized population state. I think we got like about 5 million people, of which most of them live over on the wet side of the state. Okay, another 3 to 5 weeks before you get back to normal. Well, hang in there, and I'm wishing you all the best. I don't know what the political situation is up at Calgary as to who's running the show and what things and the Alberta political environment and all of that, and how much connections and circumstances are relative to what's going on in Ottawa and the eastern side of the country, and how much of it's federal and how much difficulties going on in there. So anyway, complicated issues, and I will not dive into that because I've not studied that. So anyway, we're just about a half an hour. I've blither-blathered adequately enough. I've discussed the major things. I showed the cute little dinosaur. And the romantic in me would love the idea that they would rear up. And it may be that there was interesting little dynamic things going on in sauropods that have no counterparts in living organisms that would have an effect on that. As we get farther and farther into higher level paleogenomic reconstructions, there'll be a lot of theoretical work on that. But although the romantic in me would love the idea of rearing sauropods, all of the technical literature suggests, probably not. There we go. So anyway, see you all next week. Next week, we will be doing another installment of our ongoing series of let's find out whether the Casey Luskin papers on junk DNA mean anything like they want. And so far, the few that we've hit initially, none of them are supporting their case. If anybody wants to make book, will we in fact encounter any papers in there that legitimately support the contention that or suspicion that a large amount, beyond 50%, of the various retrotransposons and other elements are in fact functional, and functional in the way that intelligent design would like to have them, which is intentionally designed to do something, as opposed to something that comes to be functional accidentally and by mutation, and also causes problems in that because it's wasn't designed in there to be in there. It's just glitching up the systems. Because they're dealing with ALU retrotransposons, which I've been fascinated with for quite some time, and so much of those are really quite most of the citations in there are very new papers, so they're scavenging stuff, but so far it's not helping their case any. And then on the back end of that, there will be a thing that McClatchy put up a little thing about how small components can actually be functional. And some of the stuff is actually retreading material that was in the longer Casey Luskin list, but a small amount are genuinely new papers, and we'll be adding that to the list as well. Don't hold your breath if any of that turns out to not support their position. So anyway, everybody stay safe. Be careful up there in Calgary, Vesta. And we got our little advert in for The Rocks Were There. And we will be signing off and see you all next week.